Welcome to Inside Personal Growth Podcast. Deep dive with us as we unlock the secrets to personal development, empowering you to thrive. Here, growth isn't just a goal, it's a journey. Tune in, transform, and take your life to the next level by listening to just one of our podcasts. Well, welcome back to Inside Personal Growth. Joining me from London, England, is Dr. Bruno, and I don't want to mess up your last name, so say it for us. Cignacco. And he has this book called The Art of Compassionate Business, Main Principles for the Human-Oriented Enterprise. This is a Routledge book, which for many of you know, that's more of kind of like even a textbook, but it's a big book. It's 400 plus pages. But what we're going to do today is we're going to distill it down, and I'm going to tell the listeners a bit about you. Bruno, he's the CEO and founder of his own consulting business called Human Oriented Enterprise. For more than 30 years of experience supporting companies from different sectors worldwide, he's also been teaching business modules at several universities, both at graduate and postgraduate levels. And he trained companies for around 20 years in the UK and other countries. He is also well known for his TEDx speaker talk. He is a senior fellow of Higher Education Academy in UK. He is the author of several business books published in different language, one of them, The Fundamentals of International Marketing, which has been praised by International Trade Center, Geneva, Switzerland. He's a leading organizational worldwide regarding international trade and international marketing. He is a master life coach and a master NLP practitioner, neuro-linguistic programming. That's Bandler, and actually Bandler is in London. So that's where you can get that course. And his study disciplines related to personal development for more than 30 years. He's delivered countless talks, seminars, and conferences in several countries. He's also the author of a personal development book published, which we're talking about this one, the new book, The Art of Compassionate Business. I'm going to hold that up for all of you, and we're going to have a link to Amazon. For all you want to learn more about Bruno, go to humanorientedenterprise.com, humanorientedenterprise.com. You can learn more about the workshops. You can learn more about what they do there and so on. Well, Bruno, I want to know how you define compassionate business, because it's kind of this amorphous thing that floats around. We've had lots of people speak about it. Europe seems to be at the forefront, I think, as much or more than the U.S., which is probably why you have more, interest there. Richard Barrett was one of the first people I trained through who really taught this concept well. What are the core principles of it?
Yes, the core principle of compassionate business are to connect to different stakeholders and understand them on a mental level, how they think, but understanding also on an emotional level, this means how they feel, and try to help them when they face challenges. So this means that it's not only connecting to others on a mental and emotional level, but also try to support them, especially when they face difficulties. An example could be, let's imagine that the company has a supplier that is delivering merchandise late, and this supplier have to comply with the contract. If we apply the contract, this supplier might be penalized. But if we treat this supplier in a compassionate way, the company representative might talk to the supplier, might have a one-to-one meeting to see what difficulties the supplier face, and also to see how they can support the supplier in the future in order that the supplier is prevented from being late. So this means that we understand when we're treating stakeholders in a compassionate way, we understand that people face difficulty, have challenges. And when we face this challenging situation, people want to be supported. They don't want to be criticized or penalized, because when we treat others in a judgmental way, we're more prone to break up this relationship. Why? Because people become defensive. Instead, when you treat people in a supportive way, they treat you in a reciprocal way. It means supporting others, help them support you. So this means that it's a very positive cycle. You support others and they're more prone to contribute to your company in a positive way. Instead, when you penalize or you judge others very harshly, they're prone to withdraw. They're prone not to cooperate.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, many of my listeners and myself, you listen to the Dalai Lama and he says the only way the world's going to heal is if we're compassionate. Now, sometimes people would say, Bruno, compassion and business don't go hand in hand. In other words, they're saying, hey, we have to get things done on time within a budget. We've got all these parameters associated with this. And while we would maybe like to be compassionate, it's hard because we have other people leaning on us. So how do you get all the stakeholders that are involved in this together to actually know that we're operating as a compassionate business so all the stakeholders understand what the outcome needs to be?
Very interesting. First, so in order to be compassionate, we have to focus on two main aspects of business. We have to focus on what we call quantitative aspects of business, what are very important for business survival and success, such as profit, market share, productivity, quality levels. But also we have to focus on qualitative aspects of business, what cannot be measured precisely, what cannot be counted. For example, support, care, compassion, generosity, gratitude. By focusing also on qualitative aspects of business, you foster a strong, long-lasting relationship with different stakeholders. And why this is so important? Because no company can succeed without this stakeholder. There is a principle in business called interdependence. This means that companies to succeed need employees, they need suppliers, they need customers, they need community members, they need business partners. So wouldn't it be nice to have all these stakeholders on our side? You cannot force them to be on your side. The only way that they can be on your side, contributing to your company's objective, is to treat them in a caring way, in a compassionate way, supporting them when they face difficulties, being grateful to them. So, because when you do so, you build strong relationships with stakeholders, and these stakeholders are more prone to support your company. Instead, when you treat these stakeholders in a dismissive way, in a non-compassionate way, these stakeholders might tend to withdraw. For example, when you treat customers in a deceptive way or in a non-compassionate way, these customers are prone to leave negative reviews. They are prone to choose other companies' product. They are prone to push other potential customers away. Instead, when you treat this customer in a supportive way, when you adopt an attitude of service, they try to serve this customer, give them high value, these customers are prone to reciprocate. They will leave positive review, they might come back, they are prone to become loyal and committed to your company, and they might also bring some more customers, some potential customers. So this means that when you are compassionate with this stakeholder, they tend to act in a compassionate way to your company. They tend to contribute to your company's success. And as we mentioned, no company can succeed without this stakeholder because companies are always interdependent with the stakeholders.
That's a great way to phrase that, and thank you for that. Now, inside the organization, not working with other stakeholders, just through our rank and file and our people, we obviously want to treat them compassionate. We understand that employee engagement is kind of at an all-time low in this country. And it's at that low because the employees aren't being fulfilled. They're not getting what they really need or would like to have. And you see how dynamic things and how fast things are moving in our world with AI and all these other things. What would you say, as somebody who teaches this, with inside the culture of an organization, to maintain this, but also to have accountability, because we're seeing this falling short of accountability inside these organizations where things aren't getting done, and that's causing more and more agitation, and that agitation is going all the way up the ladder. And I could cite many companies where this has been happening, but how would you kind of address that as a consultant?
Very interesting question. So first, I will address a very important factor that is hidden in most organizations. In most workplaces that I observe as a consultant, there is fear. Fear. Someone have to say this very clearly. Fear, for example, employees have fear of being fired, fear of being mistaken, fear of sharing resources with other colleagues, fear of being outpaced by other colleagues. They are competing with each other instead of cooperating with each other. When there is fear, there cannot be support, there cannot be cooperation. When people are fearful, they tend to be less creative, less productive. Why? Because they become reactive. They are trying to become defensive before a threat. Instead, when a workplace is compassionate, this means that people support one another. There is what many psychologists will observe as psychological safety. There is a very interesting study on psychological safety that this researcher conducted a very important survey, and they observed that workplaces that are loving, these workplaces that they are loving, this is the word that they use. This means that people support one another, they care for one another, they are generous, they are grateful with one another. So this means that they are cooperative. In these workplaces, there is higher employee satisfaction, higher customer satisfaction. Why? Because employees that are satisfied tend to serve customers in a more effective way. Employees that are happy make customers happy. But also there is lower absenteeism, lower stress levels. This means that implies lower medical costs, but also there is also more cooperation, and this brings about a positive impact on the bottom line. This means profit. This is quite important because when employees are supported, when they feel that they are taken care of, they are appreciated within the company, they tend to be more productive. They tend to go the extra mile. And this is quite important because employees have many types of needs. Most companies focus on one type of need, economic needs. We pay a salary that they allow them to have a livelihood, nice livelihood, to pay the bills. But the employees have emotional needs. They need to be appreciated. They need to be supported. They need to be recognized when they contribute to the company. For example, a thank you note, writing a thank you note, personalized thank you note to this employee, an event to celebrate the employee's accomplishment. But also they have mental needs. I see companies that have the employee 24/7 hammering a nail. The employee get bored, they get demotivated, they don't have mental stimulation. Employees have mental need, they need novelty. For example, what about introducing job rotation? Employees 1 week working in one department, another week working in another department, so that they have a much more holistic view of the company. And employees have also social needs. I see many employees that are isolated, they are working on their own, they cannot relate to one another. In some cases, they cannot have a non-business conversation with colleagues, because I saw a company here in the UK, I won't mention the name of the company, that have 8 hours a week, they have 8 meetings every day. Employees don't have time to talk about their family, their friends in the break time. They don't have break time. So how you can develop bonds with colleagues if you only talk about business? Talking about business is important, but also employees have a life outside the company and they need to form some bonds with other colleagues. So employees, to summarize, have economic needs, social needs, mental needs, and other needs that need to be addressed. Most companies focus only on the economic needs. This is not China.
Well, for many years, I worked in spirit in business, spirituality in business. And I think the spirituality, when you really look at it, if we can't bring our spirituality to business, it's a problem, okay? In the sense that, hey, if we leave work, we do things differently than we do at work. No, it has to be one and the same. It has to be connected. And I've been actually recently advised that we make a sacrifice for our time, for a contract with an employer, for something in the future, retirement plan, a 401k plan, whatever it might be. But we've made this contract and we've sacrificed because all we have is time. That's all we've got left. So when you get down to the deep psychological part of it, there has to be a very strong driving spiritual, emotional, mental way for me to get engaged in this company, to feel like I'm doing something different, and especially with the new generations of people. And that brings me to this research. In your research, did you find cultural differences and age differences in how compassion in business is perceived and implemented across different regions? So, yes.
What I observe is there are 2 types of cultures. Many specialists in cultural studies will observe that there are two main types of cultures, what we call collectivist cultures, where people celebrate, for example, group work, group achievement. And we can talk about, for example, many countries in the South Asia area. These countries have a much more collectivist culture. And other cultures are much more what we call individualist cultures. This means that, if, for example, the UK is one of the examples, United States too, this means that what you try to pursue there is individual achievement. What you try to pursue is the personal goals. And this means that relationships are important, but they are not very well celebrated as a way of achieving goals together. So in these cases, in these two types of cultures, the cultures that are more collectivist in this spectrum, they are more prone to build relationships much more naturally, and people are more naturally compassionate with one another. However, compassion is not only like a privilege of certain cultures, it's a principle and a value that can be observed in any culture. And in some cases, people need to be trained or reminded how they can be compassionate, because we're all naturally compassionate and we're all naturally kind and supportive. There are many studies on this, but what I observed that in these collectivist cultures, the relationships are much more privileged, and people are much more naturally set up in a way that they will support one another, and the collective achievement will be celebrated as it was the individual achievement in the individualist culture. I hope that I answered this question.
Yeah, you did. You talked about an individualistic culture, which is more the UK or Europe and the United States versus some of the Asian ones. And I get that. But what are some of the common resistances companies face when trying to implement compassionate business practices, and how can they overcome them, Bruno? What would be the way that you would advise them to kind of overcome the resistance?
I like this question. I love this question. So the most important resistance is focusing on quantitative aspect of business. Companies that are only driven by economic aspect, what can be measured, what can be counted, such as profit, market share, tend to dismiss this qualitative aspect of business that are very important to build a strong relationship with a stakeholder, not only with employees, but with other stakeholders like customers, suppliers. But also there is another interesting aspect in business that is what we call time scarcity. People don't have time to build a relationship with others. So, and you see, you have tight deadlines, multitasking, many projects, many simultaneous projects that are to be fulfilled or delivered in a very short time. And people have no time to engage with one another on a mental and emotional level. I read an article many years ago that was titled "The Human Moment at Work," that was published in Harvard Business Review. And this was one of the causes that brought about the research on this topic. And this author observed companies should foster a connection with different stakeholders on a mental and emotional level. If you have multitasking, if you have tight deadlines, how you can connect to one another on a mental and emotional level? Research has observed that to be compassionate with others take only 1 minute. And there is a very interesting example that is about a doctor in the medical sector that was about to operate a patient. And this doctor, the patient was very nervous, very anxious, and this doctor had a conversation with this patient before the operation. They tried to calm the patient down, tried to support this patient. When they went through the operation, this patient needed less anesthesia than their average patient. Mm-hmm. And the post-operatory process was much quicker. So this means that compassion has very tangible, concrete effects. Help people feel better, bring about a higher state of well-being. But if you are continually tied with the deadlines, if you are very busy, how you can connect to others on a mental and emotional level? But also another aspect in business that impede this compassionate relationship, compassion-based relationship, is the use of words such as strategy, tactics. They are word-mongering words. They're very well used in business. Competing. When you are competing means you are beating others to get a bit of the share in the market. there is not a vocabulary that is allowing people to treat each other in a compassionate way. This is the way.
Well, when I say we, I'm going to say a workforce. People, that's what it's referred to. You can call it human capital, you can call it want. But we have been programmed since a very young age, and there's a conundrum between productivity and compassion, because we realize that it takes more time to be compassionate, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe you can prove me wrong, versus the time we, meaning the workforce, it has to spend to be productive. So if I'm being measured, which most businesses have, project managers, you're on a timeline, you've got a Gantt chart, you've got things you're doing, you're being measured by, are you getting it done? And if you are, then you're getting a promotion and you're getting more money. How do you take that whole structure, which is business has been built on, and change it to one where the conundrum does not exist between productivity and compassion?
Yes. Well, the very simple way, taking into account that there are things that cannot be measured. There is a fellow thinker that observed, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. So this means that there are things that are not measurable. For example, commitment, loyalty, camaraderie, a good business atmosphere with clients, with suppliers, with employees, workplace that has a very important emotional tone, a positive emotional tone. This cannot be measured in a precise way as you measure, for example, market share or productivity. But this is very important because we saw that we need relationships, strong relationships, to fulfill these objectives. There is a very counterintuitive theory that I expose in my book, that is that many companies go directly to achieve this key performance indicator: productivity, profitability, market share. However, counterintuitively, when you focus on developing strong, long-lasting relationships with suppliers, employees, community members, these key performance indicators that are the result of the company interdependence with the stakeholders are achieved naturally, effortlessly. Why? Because you care for suppliers, you care for customers, you care for employees, you support them, and they care for you. They contribute meaningfully and unconditionally to your company. Instead, when you do not care for them, the employees are likely to leave the company. Customers are likely to choose other companies. The suppliers are likely to replace you. So this means that, as I mentioned, interdependence is key. Many companies are not aware that they cannot succeed on their own. They are not an island. They are connected to others, and all the other stakeholders are contributing with value to the company. We need them on our side. So this is the change of paradigm. Instead of focusing on our own objectives, when we develop what we call win-win agreements, this means agreements that are mutually profitable to our company, but also to other stakeholders, these stakeholders will be content, will be happy, will be satisfied, and they're more prone to support our company without forcing them. Because at the end, you cannot force customers to come to your company. You cannot force employees to stay in your company because they are free and they can decide to leave your company, to choose other companies. So, but when you support them, they tend to reciprocate in a very effortless way, in a very kind way, in a very obviously positive way.
Well, and statistically, I know you've proven much of this, and there are probably doomsayers out there, but I would say here in the United States, we've seen companies like Patagonia and Whole Foods, John McKay, and people like this that have really built organizations and turned them into ESOPs. So there's an ownership in that, so they feel like they have a piece of it, and that's a big factor. So how can leaders cultivate a compassionate leadership style, one, and what are the first steps for them actually becoming more compassionate and developing a business, quote unquote, like Whole Foods or like Patagonia?
very interesting question. First of all, we have to say that everyone in a company is a leader, not only the one at the top of the company, but if you are, for example, cleaning the toilet, you are a janitor, you can also lead others. So this means that regardless of your role, you can always lead and also inspire people and allow them to follow with your vision, with your passion. First off, leaders should take into account that business mission shouldn't be only economically based. This means that we shouldn't be focusing on our business purpose only on economic aspects such as profit, market share, productivity. Should business missions, the new generation of companies have business missions that have a social impact, means impact on the society, on different stakeholders, a positive impact. They want to live a better world, but also they have a positive impact on the environment. I like Patagonia that you mentioned, that they say on their website, they say that the main shareholder is the planet. I like this metaphor. The main shareholder, metaphorically speaking, is the planet. So this means that they're contributing to environmental projects, and they have been doing for a long time, and they're very successful. So this is the first point. But also leaders should be humble. I mentioned in one of the appendices of the book that most of the leaders are I know it all. And they don't want to hear different opinions. They're not open to diverse opinions. And this is very important to change this view. When you're humble as a leader, you take into account different views from different departments, views from customers, views from people that could be lower in the hierarchy. Doesn't matter, because you can always learn. You adopt what we call a learning mindset or a growth mindset. And this means that you are prone to adapt your views, and also you are prone to accept when you are wrong, because many leaders are very arrogant and they don't want to accept when they are wrong. But also leaders also accept, that are very compassionate, also accept the hard facts. For example, if the company is not doing well, has a lot of negative customer reviews, well, we have to check what we are doing wrong. How can we learn from this challenge, this challenging experience? So how can we add more value? How can we adopt a much more serving attitude to our customer? And these leaders also are prone to what we call cross-departmental meetings. This means meetings that include representatives from different departments, the marketing department, the administrative department, the financial department, to analyze every single topic. Why? Because they don't call only the specialists. They want to hear diverse views on the topic, because most of the topics in business are very complex, and they want to have a multi-dimensional view on the issue and avoid any blind spots. So they are very prone to learn. And these leaders are also very supportive. They try to adopt an empathetic view on different stakeholders, supportive view, but also I will say a compassionate view. This means that whenever possible, this leader will try to encourage, for example, employees to have some coaching or to have some mentoring, to join some mentoring schemes.
Well, look, Bruno, you teach in the university, and on top of that, my question for you, this is a kind of a sideball question. As we've watched here over the last, since the pandemic, changes in leadership in Venezuela, then you've got Putin in Russia, you've got potentially another leader coming into the United States, which could take over as president again. None of these gentlemen have much compassion. Yet they're leading one of them, the free world country, right? And it always intrigues me. Here we're talking about compassion in business, and the biggest business we have is government. One of the biggest businesses we have is government. And not very many of them are being run with compassion and understanding. They're being run on metrics and all the other things that you just talked about. What would be your thoughts around Venezuela, Russia, the U.S., China, North Korea, where we have now seen a takeover of power in many of these places, which is just power and money. Power and money.
Yes, what I will say, I generally don't want to talk about politics, but we will say that different governments in the world have their own style, and this government that you mentioned probably have some leeway for it being much more human-oriented. This means that even they have their own objectives. In some cases, objective that could be military objective or political objectives, is not enough, because at the end, societies are also interdependent. In a society, in a country, we need each other, and the world is interdependent. No country can subsist, survive on its own. We need each other. The principle in international trade, I'm specialized in international marketing, is the principle of interdependence. You cannot be specialized in everything. So I feel that some leaders, maybe some of the one that you mentioned, and others too, can be more aware of the interdependence. And this is, you cannot survive on a win-lose agreement. If you try to win at the expense of others, this is a short-lived victory. But
Yes.
is a much more sustainable approach. The sustainable approach means that we want a world not only for ourselves, but for our great-great-great-great-grandchildren, maybe 200 years' time. So this means that maybe these visions, and maybe I don't want to talk about any particular leader, but maybe some leaders have a very short-term vision. We call short-term vision, means that they have a very limited view, and this implies that they don't think about a sustainable way of developing their economies, the social environment, and well, we don't know how this will end up, this government that you mentioned.
But Bruno,
at the end, yes.
how do you develop these leaders, or where do these leaders come from who've, as I told them, left their ego at the door when they get into a meeting? Because, a lot of times, it doesn't matter if it's a corporation or it's a government, as you said, the egos sometimes can be so high and can, I want to code, be so divisive in the way in which they speak to people and so on. So what advice would you give to any business trying to embed compassion into their business model from the beginning? Because I think sometimes this has to happen from when I start the business, not after the business is going.
Very important question. So first off, if you are the leader and you are starting up this business, give a good example, because there is a lot of research on this, that leader models the behavior in the workplace and also in relation to other stakeholders. When the leader is self-centered, what do you expect for people to work at this company and act in a generous way? Not at all. They will take the role model of the leader. So the leader is very important. But also, I would encourage these companies that are starting or are developing that ask themselves very important self-reflection question. How can I be more supportive with different stakeholders? Because we depend on each other. How can I be more generous and grateful? And when I talk about this in different training courses, they told me, we cannot be generous with the stakeholder because we don't have money, we don't have resources, we don't have finances. But you can be generous with different stakeholders in a very intangible way. What about a manager that is generous with their subordinate by giving them advice, giving them an ear when they have some problems, giving them the chance to work flexible time when you have some challenges at home? And what about the colleague that is helping a new colleague with, for example, some training or coaching this colleague or mentoring when possible? So this means that being generous begets more generosity. Instead, when you are stingy, when you are self-centered, these people that you are relating to tend to act in the same way. They tend to be not generous. They tend to withdraw in many cases.
Well, so look, you did a lot of studies for this book and observed a lot. And what would be the future trends in compassionate business practices, and where do you believe that this is headed? Here we are today, 2024, May. If we look forward another 10 years, where are the trends headed, Bruno? And what do you think we can expect given all of the technology that's going to evolve in the next 10 years, everything from the AI to robots, that'll actually be some of those things, replacing people in the workplace for this machine learning?
Good. 3 points. Technology might replace some workers, but whenever the company uses new technology, for example, AI or any other technology, there should be always human touch. This means, for example, if you send emails, there should offer the possibility or the customer to contact the company on the phone. If you're using AI, well, you can offer also the option for customer to phone this company. So this means that technology should be used alongside what we call the human contact. Another point that I want to highlight, that the trend shows that many companies that are becoming more compassionate will give a lot of importance not only to financial statement, for example, balance sheet, income statement, if they get a loss or a profit, but also they have also a lot of priority and given a lot of priority to what we call social statement or social impact statement, where they show, for example, how much money they donated to charities, when they show how they reduce the carbon dioxide emission. This is quite important. Why? Because companies know that by showing alongside the financial report, showing the social and environmental impact reports, their reputation will be enhanced. And a company with a high reputation, according to research, bring about better employees, more talented employees. Also, this company attract more interesting investors that are focused not only on the profitability, but are focused also on social projects. And this company also has a better brand image and is also recognized by the media in a much more positive way.
Well, you're certainly a thought leader in this area, and you have created a book which gives people the foundations and the main principles here of the art of compassionate business. And to wrap up our podcast, I would like to ask you this. Throughout your journey as an educator, consultant, writing books, doing all the things you've done, and the research and advocating for compassionate business, what's been the most surprising or impactful lesson that you've learned personally and professionally from all this work and all your work of knowledge, your whole library of knowledge for Bruno?
Thank you very much for the question. The most important piece of information that I can convey here is that the most important resource in business is not technology, it's not artificial intelligence, it's not funds, it's not information, but it's the human being. Because the human being is a meta resource. It's a resource that helps companies generate other resources. The human being, for example, an employee, can help companies generate business plans, innovative products, innovative services, and so on. So this means that the human being adds value continually, but the human being needs to be treated in a supportive and caring way. And the human being go beyond any business strategy and tactics. For the reason the subtitle of my book is Main Principle for the Human-Oriented Enterprise. This means that these principles are timeless, they're perennial. Principles such as generosity, compassion, care, and can be applied by small companies, big companies, of any sector. And will help companies foster long-lasting, mutually beneficial relationship with the stakeholders.
Well, you have opened my eyes up to a way that businesses, and for everybody listening, can actually transform how they're operating their business and supporting the culture to be more mindful of what you were saying, compassion, love, understanding, all of these principles that should be being used at business. I just don't think are being used in business as regular, which is why, one, you wrote this book, and two, you've had a TEDx talk, and three, you've got a website where people can reach out to you to learn more about what they can do to change. The key point is their willingness to change. And I think if something in your business is not going well, you should really look at what Bruno just had to say, because the reality is what he's teaching is to help your business right-side itself from potentially some of the challenges that you face inside the business, simply because you're not paying attention to the people in the business. And I think that's the most important thing. Any final words on that before we end up the podcast?
Thank you very much. Final words could be, I want to invite the listener to ask themselves these questions. How can I be more generous and supportive with every single stakeholder? This question should be asked at the beginning of the day, and it's a very easy way to start becoming more compassionate and generating a positive cycle of ripple effects within the company and with the stakeholders.
Well, Bruno, I'm going to say, Dr. Cignacco, this is a great book. Everybody go out and get a copy of this book. Also, go to the website where you can find out more. And that website is, I'm going to give the address here in just 1 minute, is humanorientedenterprise.com. And we'll have a link to that as well. There you can find Bruno's bio. You can find out more about what they do, their approach, their experience, consultancy service, and tailor-made workshops, and also workshops that they provide. Bruno, thanks for spending a few minutes with us on Inside Personal Growth, talking about your new book and everything you have. Namaste to you.
Thank you very much, Greg.
Thank you for listening to this podcast on Inside Personal Growth. We appreciate your support. And for more information about new podcasts, please go to InsidePersonalGrowth.com or any of your favorite channels to listen to our podcast. Thanks again, and have a wonderful day.